They broke you in broad daylight, not with swords or bullets, but with silence, with doubt, with the kind of betrayal that doesn't bleed, but leaves scars so deep they hum at night. You remember the faces, the ones who smiled as they watched you fall, the ones who pretended to reach out, only to pull their hands back when they knew everyone was watching. You remember the sound of your name leaving their mouths like a curse, as if they were glad you were no longer competition, as if your pain fed them. You didn't understand it then, but that was the moment your death began. Not a physical one, a psychological dismantle, a funeral of who you thought you were. The days after were the quiet kind of chaos. You walked through rooms that no longer felt like yours. The mirror stopped recognizing. Even your reflection looked away, ashamed. You thought it was weakness. You thought breaking meant, but it wasn't. It was the initiation, the tearing away of illusions, the destruction before transformation. Every empire begins with, every god is born from exile, and so were you. The fire that used to burn bright inside you flickered into embers, but it never died. You mistook stillness for defeat. The world mistook your silence for surrender. People whispered. They said you changed. They said you'd gone quiet, distant, cold, but they didn't see what was happening beneath your skin. They didn't see the architecture of your mind rearranging itself, stripping away the softness that had made you to break. You were studying pain like an ancient text, learning its rhythm, memorizing its language, and in the quiet, something began to move inside you. Something older than fear, something primal. The part of you that doesn't need validation, the part that waits, watches, calculates. You were no longer reacting, you were observing, and that terrified them. Because the truth is, they didn't just want you to fail, they wanted you to vanish, to disappear quietly so they could forget the reflection of what they could have been. But you didn't vanish. You adapted. You learned to live in the ruins. You built your sanctuary inside the storm they left behind. You became fluent in solitude. You began to understand that isolation isn't punishment, it's a forge. And the longer they ignored your existence, the sharper you became. Now, when they look at you, they sense something they can't explain. A gravity, a stillness that unsettles. They laugh less loudly in your presence. They avoid your eyes. They feel it, the thing that rose from the ashes they buried you. You carry silence like a weapon now. You no longer chase power. You become it, and somewhere deep in their subconscious they know. Their betrayal didn't destroy you. It initiated. You were never their equal. You were their lesson. The fall was never the end. It was the moment the world stopped deserving your mercy. They took everything from you. Your name, your light, your purpose. You stood in the aftermath of their betrayal, and the silence that followed was louder than any scream. You stopped defending yourself because no one was listening anyway. You let the world think you were finished, and in a way, you were. The version of you they knew, the one that still sought validation, that still believed in fairness, died quietly one night, without witnesses, without mourning. What replaced it wasn't born of hope. It was born of something older, something colder. You became what pain always intended you to be, untouchable. Days began to blur, not because time passed too quickly, but because meaning had dissolved. You woke up without reason, spoke without emotion, walked without direction. The mirror no longer reflected your face. It reflected the consequence of trust misplaced. You started seeing people as patterns, not souls. Lies carried familiar shapes. Smiles became warnings. Every gesture reeked of motive. That's when you stopped reaching for the world and started observing it instead. You became the ghost watching from the edges, unseen yet seeing everything. And in that isolation, something dangerous started to stir. It was clarity. The kind that hurts, the kind that strips illusions bare and leaves truth standing raw and merciless. You realize people don't destroy you because you're weak. They destroy you because they sense what you could become if left unchecked. You learned to mask potential under quiet stares and careful words. You practiced restraint like it was art. You let them underestimate, mock your silence, mistake your absence for defeat. They had no idea that you were no longer playing the same game. You had left the board in time. You were building something far greater, your mind. In the shadows, you began your reconstruction. No witness, no applause. You rewired your thoughts, piece by piece. Pain became instruction. Rejection became data. Loneliness became strategy. Every scar turned into a map leading to something. You didn't crave revenge anymore. You craved precision. You started studying patterns of betrayal, rhythms of manipulation, the architecture of control. The darkness stopped being your cage. It became your training ground. While they lived in noise, you found power in stillness. While they sought validation, you mastered invisibility. There came a point when you realized that disappearing wasn't defeat. It was camouflage. You weren't lost. You were hidden. and there's a difference. Because hidden things observe, hidden things prepare, hidden things return sharper. You stop needing to explain yourself. You stop waiting for understanding. You became fluent in silence, the most dangerous language there is. And that's when something ancient within you opened its eyes. Not rage, not vengeance, something quieter, far more deliberate. The instinct of a survivor who has seen death, tasted ruin, and chosen evolution instead. You weren't human in the ordinary sense anymore. You were something the old you would have feared, a mind sharpened by suffering, emotion distilled into purpose. They thought they were. But ghosts don't disappear. They learn to walk through walls. You don't remember when it started, the shift. Maybe it was after the final betrayal, when even the people you once bled for turned their backs with quiet smiles. Or maybe it was when the silence became heavier than the noise. You stopped begging for understanding. You stopped explaining. You stopped caring who stayed and who left. The world had taken everything, your trust, your softness, your certainty, and left you standing in the ruin. But somewhere in that ruin, a pulse began. Faint at first, then louder. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was something older, colder, deeper. The birth of a new law within you. Pain began to speak in a voice you recognized but had never listened. It didn't whisper pity, it commanded obedience. It told you the truth no one else dared to say, that no one was coming to save you. That strength isn't found in being loved, but in being alone and still refusing to break. You learned to look at your scars like they were sacred symbols, marks of survival carved by the gods who tested your worth. What once made you tremble, now made you calculate. You stopped reacting, you started studying. The chaos around you became a pattern, and you finally understood what it meant to be dangerous. Not because you wanted power, but because you no longer feared losing. You woke up one day and realized your mind had changed shape. Every thought felt sharper, more deliberate. You began speaking less, watching more. People mistook your silence for weakness again. But this time, you smiled. They couldn't see what was happening behind your eyes. The architecture of a new self being built brick by brutal brick. Discipline replaced hope. Focus replaced faith. You stopped waiting for things to happen and started pulling reality apart with your own hand. There was no audience, no applause, just you, the dark, and the voice inside whispering, "Now you understand." You noticed something strange after that. The world started bending differently. The same faces that once looked down on you now looked away. They didn't understand the stillness in your eyes, the quiet that followed your presence. You had become unreadable, and in a world addicted to noise, mystery is power. You carried yourself differently, not as someone trying to prove anything, but as someone who already knows. The betrayal that once burned now served as every rejection became information. Every scar became strategy. You had turned pain into language, and now you spoke it fluently. You began to move with precision, not rage. You no longer fought the storm, you became it. Every step was measured. Every silence was intentional. You didn't need validation, you had evidence. You'd seen your own death and lived. And that kind of person doesn't crave recognition, they terrify those who, because pain had revealed your true name, and it was one that couldn't be spoken by ordinary mouths. It carried the weight of survival, the echo of every moment you refused. The world may never say it out loud, but they feel it when you walk by. That ancient, unspoken knowing that you were never broken, you were tempered. You start to rebuild in silence. No applause, no validation, just the sound of your own breathing in the dark. Slow, steady, deliberate. Every morning feels like walking barefoot across glass, but you keep walking anyway, because pain has become your new compass. You stopped chasing comfort, stopped asking why. You no longer cry for what was lost. Instead, you sharpen yourself. The old you still whispers, begging you to go back to the familiar, the soft, but you've buried that voice beneath the weight of 1,000 quiet battles no one will ever know about. The climb isn't glamorous, it's brutal. It's you versus everything you once tolerated. Every weakness you fed now claws at the walls. You starve it to death. You don't beg the universe for a sign anymore. You are the sign. You start cutting away the people who only loved you or losing. The same faces that pitied your pain now fear your progress. You move differently. Not faster, not louder, but with the precision of someone who has nothing left to lose. There's power in that kind of silence. The kind that makes others nervous. The kind that feels like a storm about to speak. Discipline becomes your weapon. Each repetition, each choice, each refusal to fall back, they stack like stones into a fortress of self-respect. You wake up before the sun, not for glory, but to make war with your own excuse. You see the reflection in the mirror, and it's not a man or woman anymore. It's a shadow forged from everything the world tried to break. The old you pleads from the depths, tired, soft, addicted to comfort. You don't answer. You simply keep climbing, one invisible step at a time, toward a summit no one else believes exists. There are nights when the memories crawl back, the betrayal, the mockery, the abandonment. But now, they don't wound you. They remind you. They are ghosts that serve you, not haunt you. You've learned to weaponize heartbreak, to turn rejection into fuel, to make solitude your sanctuary. You move through crowds like a cipher, unreadable, untouchable. Your silence isn't weakness anymore, it's strategy. People project their fears onto you because they sense it. The death of who you were and the birth of something far more dangerous. The climb never ends. It wasn't meant. It's not a journey toward perfection. It's a ritual of destruction. Each day you erase a piece of the old identity until only the essential remains. The part of you that cannot be manipulated, cannot be controlled. The climb is sacred because it's where you shed illusion of safety, of fairness, of love without loyalty. You stop looking for light at the top because you realize you are the fire now. Everything that once broke you has become your foundation, and the world doesn't need to understand that. It only needs to feel the ground shake when you rise. The whispers return before the applause. You hear them before you ever see their faces. They speak softly, as if your name itself carries weight, as if saying it too loud might summon something they're not ready to face. Once, those whispers were about your failures, your mistakes, your fall. Now, they echo differently. They sound uncertain, reverent, even afraid. They can't quite name what changed in you, only that something ancient woke up where weakness. You became a storm that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives, and everything bends in its path. You walk through the same streets that once watched you crawl, but the air feels different now. The ground remembers your struggle. The walls seem to pull back slightly as you pass. You no longer explain yourself because your silence has learned how to speak. People feel it. That unnerving calm that follows a person who has died once metaphorically and came back with nothing left to fear. They see it in your eyes, the quiet precision, the awareness that no mask can fool you anymore. You used to seek understanding, now you simply observe. Your movements are deliberate, slower than before, sharper too. The same world that mocked you now studies you, trying to decode the method behind your composure. They call it luck, they call it timing, but you know what it really is. The patience of someone who stopped reacting and started calculating. Every breath, every pause, every glance had become a weapon. You learned that chaos only consumes those who still fight it. You don't fight anymore, you guide it. You let it circle, roar, and reveal who truly fears losing control. There's power in restraint. They feel it even when you say nothing, especially when you say nothing. Your stillness terrifies them because it mirrors their noise. You've outgrown the hunger for revenge. You've seen how easily power slips through hands that grab too tightly. You move differently, not chasing, not fleeing, just existing in complete awareness. It's unsettling to those who once fed on your doubt. They sense you've detached from their little games, their gossip, their validation. And when they realize they can no longer reach you through guilt or praise, they begin to break. They'll pretend not to see your rise, but they'll watch. They'll avoid your eyes, but they'll feel them. You've entered a space beyond acknowledgement, where you no longer need to be seen to be felt. That's when the whispers become prayers, not for you, but for themselves, because they sense that somewhere along the way you became something they can't name, something they once feared in others but never expected to fear in you. You've become the mirror that exposes what they've been running from. And deep down, they know the truth. You're no longer trying to be great. You've simply remembered that you always were. They used to look at you like a ghost that never learned how to haunt. You walked through rooms filled with people who once swore they'd help you, and all you heard were their echoes, shallow, hollow, pretending not to remember what they said when you were crawling. But now, they stand still when you enter. Their laughter fades mid-breath. Their confidence collapses beneath the weight of your silence. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Your presence itself has become the evidence. The same mouths that once spat doubt now whisper your name like it's a forbidden spell. They don't know when it happened, the day the victim stopped begging and started calculating. You carry yourself differently, not taller, not louder, just heavier. Every step is deliberate, every glance measured. The weak still mistake it for calm, but those who've touched real darkness recognize it for what it is, control. You mastered the chaos they tried to drown you in. You weaponize. You learn that true power doesn't scream, it waits. It watches, it remembers. The fire they mocked wasn't meant to warm them. It was meant to consume everything they built on your name. There was a time when your reflection disgusted, when your hands shook and your words betrayed your thoughts. You couldn't even look at your scars without feeling smaller. Now, those same scars speak a language older than pain. the language of survival. You stopped hiding them because you realized they weren't marks of failure, but proof that you never surrendered. You turned your mind into an altar and burned your weakness. Every betrayal became a scripture. Every lie became fuel. And in the silence between heartbeats, you forged something terrifying: peace. They can't understand you anymore. You're too still, too aware, too unshaken. You don't react, you calculate. You don't defend, you observe. You've learned the oldest rule, that survival is not about strength, it's about patience. The serpent lives longer than the lion because it strikes only once, and only when it must. You became that serpent, cold, precise, eternal. They tried to call you heartless, but the truth is crueler. You simply learned to live without needing their validation. You became immune to flattery, indifferent to hate. You no longer chase destiny, you design it. Now the air changes, you speak. You can feel it, the hesitation, the trembling equilibrium of people who suddenly remember how they treated you. The power isn't in revenge, it's in knowing you could, but choosing silence instead. You don't seek to destroy them any. Their fear is enough. Their confusion, their envy, their late realization, they're all offerings at the altar of your rebirth. You became everything they swore you'd never be, and yet, you don't need them to see it. The universe has a way of revealing the truth without words, and so, you walk through the same world that once tried to bury you, only now, it feels smaller, quieter, because deep down, they know the fire they mocked has become the light that blinds. They thought breaking you would erase you. That silence would swallow your name. That time would dissolve your existence like smoke in the wind. But silence was your weapon. While they whispered about your downfall, you were rebuilding yourself in the dark, alone, without applause, without mercy. You stopped needing validation the day you realized that your suffering wasn't punishment. It was preparation. Every betrayal became a lesson. Every scar, a blueprint. You learned that survival isn't about strength. It's about patience. It's about disappearing long enough for the noise to forget you, and then returning when the ground itself trembles at your steps. You stopped speaking their language. You spoke only in movement, in precision, in restraint. Power became quieter, sharper. They looked into your eyes and saw something they couldn't define, a calm that unnerved them, a silence that screamed louder than their noise ever could. You no longer seek revenge. You are revenge made flesh. You no longer seek light. You became the storm that devours it. You understand now that peace is not the absence of chaos. It's the dominance over it. You mastered the art of vanishing and the science of returning. The world forgot you. That was their mistake. They thought absence meant, but absence was your camouflage. They don't understand that real power doesn't announce itself. It watches, studies, it waits. And when it moves like destiny. Inevitable, precise, untouchable. You don't rage anymore. Rage is for the inexperienced. You observe, you calculate. You strike only once, and it's enough. That's what frightens them now. Your control, your silence, your refusal to be provoked. You used to chase meaning. Now, meaning chases. They pray to gods they don't understand, asking for protection from the very force you've become, because their gods fear you. Not for your violence, but for your clarity. You've seen behind the curtain. You've realized that everything sacred can bleed, that every truth can fracture, that power isn't granted, it's taken, molded, reforged through pain. You are the living proof that the divine can be dethroned by discipline. You were once the hunted, now you are the shadow that hunts. You move differently, measured, deliberate, untouchable. Even your silence carries weight. And when they finally whisper your name, it won't be in mockery. It will be in fear, in reluctant respect. Because they'll know, the one they buried became the storm that reshaped the earth. You carry your scars like armor, your past like scripture. You've outgrown revenge, outlived weakness, outlasted doubt. You become a paradox, both the weapon and the wound, the silence and the thunder. You no longer seek recognition. You became the proof that some souls are not meant to be understood, only remembered. And when they finally speak of you, they won't call you by your old name. They'll call you what you become, the echo that outlived the gods.